Welcome, and thanks for listening to Intrinsic Investigations. My name is Mr. Olivo, and I created this podcast because I've been fortunate enough over the last decade to see unique and thought-provoking projects happen in my classroom, and we wanted a place to showcase them. The true heart of this podcast lies not in the content discovered, but in exploring the personal stories of these young researchers as they journey through uncharted and unfamiliar intellectual terrain. By sharing their stories, we hope to normalize the challenges and frustrations that come with independent research, and also share those moments where students transcend the normal grind of the school day to discover concepts that range from the global to deeply personal. We will begin with a brief introduction to the student of focus, why they picked their topic, and discuss their growth over the course of the last year. It should be mentioned that the opinions expressed in this podcast in no way reflect the opinions of our school district, Bergen County Technical Schools and Special Services, or our school itself, Bergen County Technical High School, Teterboro, or the College Board. The work detailed in this podcast was most likely completed in AP Capstone, but this podcast is in no way affiliated with the College Board. This is the season finale. And I just want to say thank you to all the students who are in my class right now, because you've made recording these, I think, 17 episodes. This was a lot. You've made it a breeze. Thank you all for being so polite and quiet during the recording of this. You can clap for yourselves. That's totally fine. We do have an audience today. All right. We are going to end the season with the only project this year that examined, that worked with human subjects. And the person across from me, Liz, is going to introduce herself, and then we'll get into the work. So, Liz, tell the people a little bit about yourself.
Hello, my name is Liz. What should I talk about?
I don't know, whatever you want to talk about.
I would say my interests are pretty diverse, because outside of school, the main thing I do is art. I do photography.
Oh, yeah?
And I'm also really interested in psychology. So I have these different interests, and I guess what's interesting is that they somehow all intersect in the concept of looking into the mind and how we work. So yeah, that's just what I do. I guess this project was also another addition to this general interest that I have.
Yeah, the work definitely is focused on psychology, and there isn't a ton of photography there. But yeah, can I ask you a question about when you work in photography? Do you use film, or do you use digital, or do you use both?
I use digital, but I'm hoping to get into film soon.
Do you feel like everybody uses digital?
Kind of.
Is that a majority illusion?
Maybe, because we think that, if everyone else is using digital, we should also use it.
And that will be, yeah, I'm just, trying to foreshadow where this work is about to go.
Yeah.
So what did your project that was focused on psychology, which is the only project this year that used human subjects, what did you try to find out? Like, what were you trying to investigate, and what did you ultimately find about these teens that you investigated?
So my project was based on something called the majority illusion. And what it is it measures whether people are overestimating how widespread a behavior is within a social circle they belong to, like their grade or their major or their class. It gives us numbers to see if this perception is inflated or not. So I combined that with the concept of people overestimating adulthood signaling, which is when teens are trying to appear adult. So they take on adult behaviors. So the ones that I picked were according to literature review that talked about what teens consider is adulthood signaling, which is like economic independence, so getting a job, dressing like an adult, like you're going to work. So there's that like, intern corporate fashion, and things like resume building on LinkedIn, because all these things are things we weren't normally doing even 10, 15 years back. And I thought that there had been some kind of inflation in how fast we were adopting these behaviors, where it's like high schoolers are now making these steps to looking adult.
Before you came in the room, we were talking about LinkedIn profiles. And so if a high schooler has a LinkedIn profile, is that an adult signaling behavior as you defined it within your work?
Yeah, just having some kind of public professional profile, that was my third behavior. That's considered an adulthood signaling. But the interesting thing was that I thought that these behaviors going into the project were actual indicators of kids growing up faster.
Yeah, like
so
there's an acceleration there.
Yeah, so I thought we were having some kind of cultural acceleration of maturing. But what ended up being the twist was that these aren't really actual indicators of growth, but more so just legible social signals. So there's two different types of behavior. So one where there's some kind of intrinsic change that elicits some kind of behavior, and then another where you're just kind of pattern recognizing what the group is doing and fitting into that group. Because if everyone in a school has a LinkedIn profile, everyone in a school is doing a certain thing, your teens just in general, this is what research says, we're more adaptable to what the group norm is. So if LinkedIn profiles was a group norm, we would be compelled to make one, not because we wanted one, because we're growing up faster and we feel that we need to become adult, but more so because the group is doing it.
Is that due to the fact, I'm thinking of this book, 10 to 25 by David Yeager. It's the idea that people in this age 10 to 25 range are very sensitive to social status at this point in time. Is that what's, I guess, I mean, you like psychology. I'm a bio teacher by trade, but I tend to think of it more like on a biological level. Like there's something changing about the brain at that point that is becoming keenly aware of social status and interconnected social status. And at this point in time, because of technology, that network, your social network, has become hundreds to thousands to possibly tens of thousands of people, whereas 10,000 years ago it might have been 40. So so that's kind of the driver there. I'm going to ask one more question about LinkedIn and see if this falls under the majority illusion. I have a habit of, I don't use LinkedIn often, but when I do get LinkedIn notifications, I feel like the verb that I typically see is that people say things like, I'm thrilled to announce that my new work got published, or I'm thrilled to announce that I have an internship, is like me being cognizant of like these small sets of emails that have the terms thrilled in it. Like, is that creating a majority illusion that everybody on LinkedIn is using the word thrilled to describe like their it's not a verb, it's their adjective. Like that's their emotional state. Like people are going to LinkedIn to sound off about how thrilled they are.
Yeah, I guess I could use this example to apply majority illusion. So if we have a couple of posts saying thrilled, that they're thrilled to do something, and it's not all the posts, it's just a couple, but those are the ones that are getting the most attention and the most reach in your LinkedIn feed, then to you, the majority of your connections on LinkedIn is thrilled to do something, which means you would also tend to implicate that into your posts because you feel that this is what the majority is doing on LinkedIn in their posts, how they're wording it. And this might actually lead to an inflation in how many people are using that word in LinkedIn in general. So that's basically how majority illusion goes. You think that a behavior that's not actually widespread is more widespread than you think it is because a certain number of very highly visible people are using it.
Okay, all right. And that makes total sense because I could be, again, I'm getting this small sample that LinkedIn is giving me like that little email like, hey, check out this person. And it's always someone sharing good news, and I guess that word would be the operative there.
Yeah.
But people talk about tons of other things on LinkedIn, I'm sure. That's a great example. In the literature that you reviewed, they mostly weren't looking at professional signaling behaviors. I think you mentioned like they were looking at things like drinking and like drug use and things like that. So how did your like sources view this majority illusion and teen behavior?
It's interesting because my research is the first one that applies it to a real life situation with adolescents, but also the first one that looks into behaviors other than the very traditional teen
like
behavior.
Teen risk behaviors.
Yeah, teen risk behavior. This I shifted because of the IRB, basically, the Institutional Review Board. I can't ask kids to identify if they're doing illegal behavior, like underage drinking.
Yeah. It's like, hey, do you online gamble? Right?
Yeah, I can't ask people that. But also it fit in well because I was actually trying to measure this kind of adulthood signaling and less of teen risk behavior to begin with. So it was just a good overlap of my intentions and what the IRB wanted from me.
Yeah, it's an interesting methodological shift that I commend you on, because some people who are doing this project might not have the imagination to be like, okay, I can't do online gambling. Let's just make it online gambling for the example. I can't do online gambling, but then they wouldn't be able to see, okay, well, if I'm going to do this ethically in a school setting, in a high school setting, because you're dealing with minors, what are the types of questions that I can ask them where they're not super psychologically invasive, they're not exposing the school to liability, exposing the student to possible harm, especially if they take your survey, they're like, wait, I'm not online gambling? Maybe I should be. Maybe the survey creates majority illusion itself. So I commend you on shifting to something that was novel, but also ethically sound within the context of your work. So nice job.
Thank you.
So let's talk about how this method shook out, because you had to go through the IRB process, basically had to be approved at the school level and with an outside individual who's a member of the board. When you were crafting your survey questions, what were those questions, and how did you use them to try to operationalize and measure majority illusion?
So for the IRB, there's, in my opinion, from what I've experienced this year, there's two things that they're looking for, which is first that the topic, which we were just talking about, is ethically okay to ask kids if you're working with minors at a school IRB. And then second is if the method of the questionnaire, how you organize the questionnaire, is actually applicable to the topic that you chose.
Yeah, it's like it's sound. Yeah,
my issue is with the second prong that I've kind of decided on, because my survey questions, I made a bunch of surveys, but the ones that I actually got to the IRB were 2 surveys, and the first one had the major issue of having questions that were way too broad, and at this point I hadn't actually picked behaviors to look at because I missed out on this critical component of majority illusion, which is that you have to have some kind of legible behavior to examine. So I was asking things like, how many people in your grade do you think are acting older than they actually are, or trying to be more adult? Because I had somehow just ascribed this really abstract concept, this idea of being precociously mature, to the behavior that I was going to measure with the majority illusion. So that was the big thing that kind of set me back in the beginning. But this changed a lot when I just looked more into the majority illusion.
So you had to kind of go back to your sources.
Yeah, I went back to my sources. I got a better understanding of the majority illusion. So the things were that it has 3 different variables you need to get in order to measure an IRB, the majority illusion. And you needed some kind of actual behavior to examine.
Okay.
So the behaviors I picked out, which helped me. And then I also figured out that I need to ask questions that will lead me to some kind of numerical variable that can help me get a majority illusion.
Yeah, you gotta measure that.
Yeah.
Quantitatively. What were the 3 behaviors you ultimately settled on in your survey?
The first one was having a paid job. Second one was dressing professionally. And third one was building a professional profile.
And again, whereas before, if it was like the drinking, the drugs, the gambling, those are like, it's like situating majority illusion within vices that typically have a negative connotation. Those three that you picked might not have a negative connotation at all.
Mm-hmm.
But so then why are you examining them? Like, it's like, what's the problem then?
Yeah. The issue with these behaviors, and especially teen signaling in general, is that they're used as some kind of social hierarchy measure where kids feel pressured to adopt a behavior. And just principally, like having a paid job, dressing nicely like you're going to an internship, or having a LinkedIn isn't bad to begin with. Like they're good things that you're trying to get involved in as a high schooler. But when it becomes used as a social signal, kids aren't adopting this because they want to, but because they feel pressured to fit into the norm of the majority.
Yeah, and that's the nuance right there. Again, it's like there's negative connotations or positive connotations, but like to get beyond good and bad, there are consequences. And that consequence, it seems like you're arguing, is it's where you fall in the social hierarchy, or where you perceive yourself, not even where you maybe actually fall, but where you perceive yourself, you could feel less than or possibly greater than other people in your social group, depending on if you adopt these behaviors.
That's right.
All right. So of the people that you sampled, how many respondents did you get for your survey? I
got 76 that I could use at the end.
Okay. And I'm sure getting those responses, what was the ideal number you wanted?
The ideal number was, I started with 30 because I had absolutely no expectations for this questionnaire.
Yeah,
but I started getting responses, and I was like, maybe I should up this to 50 because 50 would be the actual ideal number. And then I ended up getting 76.
Okay.
So.
And of the three things that you measured, what did you discover with the survey?
The things I discovered was, first, that these behaviors that I picked were, to start off with, actual majority behaviors in my study site, because we did this at our Magnet High School. And the interesting thing is, the other kind of risk teen behaviors might have actually been more eligible social signals in any other typical school in our county, suburban New Jersey, because that is the kind of social signaling that kids are involved in.
Okay.
But at our school,
you're saying the more risky stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
In our school, the social signals, or whatever measures how socially potent you are, is whether you have things like a paid job or you have lots of LinkedIn followers, which is a strange shift. But the kind of issue was that majority illusion depends on these behaviors not being majority in real life. But a lot of these behaviors were actually majority in real life, because a lot of the kids were actually doing this. And I ended up getting majority illusion scores that were mostly negative. The only positive majority illusion that I got was in dressing professionally, my second behavior, and this was a tiny majority illusion, so almost null. And this result, I guess, kind of threw me off, because I thought that I would be getting positive majority illusions where I could talk about in my results section. Mm-hmm. So I had to come up with some kind of variable, and this is where another question that I put into my survey really came into play, because this question asked, how pressured do you feel to adopt these behaviors? So I just kind of grouped people up into how many people answered 5 to yes, I feel very pressured. How many people answered no, I don't feel really pressured, as in a 1, because I asked this on a Likert scale.
I gotcha.
And I looked at these groupings compared with who actually had a majority illusion. Just looking at how many people answered a percentage of who they perceived to be doing the behavior higher than the ASP, the actual percentage that I got. And then I found out that kids who felt most pressured to conform also were the ones with the highest likelihood of having majority illusion. So when we go into the individual level,
that matches the literature then.
Yeah, it does, because even though the general majority illusion isn't there, when you go into actual groups of kids who are experiencing majority illusion, they feel very pressured to conform to these behaviors. So that's what I ended up talking about in my results.
Do you feel like that's the biggest takeaway? Like you just gave a great overview of the data set, but if you had to say, like, what are the new things that you added to this pre-existing conversation, like, what would they be?
I think that's one when it comes to data and results. But another thing is that you can extend majority illusion into non-digital spaces.
Okay.
The only setback that I had here was to measure some really detailed majority illusion index. You would need a mapping of who knows who and who talks in the school, who follows who in the school setting. And it's hard to do that, but there's also surveys you can use, like just friendship naming. You can make very simple maps on this. And I think that people were hesitant, or in existing literature, people didn't try to apply majority illusion to real life settings because it's kind of difficult to see where the connections exist.
Right. It's hard to trace.
Yeah.
Trace the nodes in that network.
Yeah. Also considering connections in the majority illusion definition aren't really about who's friends. It's more about who can see who.
It's the visibility.
So one node, as in a participant in the social circle, might not know another node that knows them. So
Gotcha.
This connection would be one-sided, but we still see that as a connection when we're measuring majority illusion. But that was the big takeaway, that you can extend majority illusion beyond digital spaces and beyond these like very just repetitive risk factor teen behaviors that a lot of the studies were just recreating in their own studies. You can move beyond those, and that was, I think, the conceptual takeaway.
I think we've touched on this before, but I think it's worth elaborating on. Do you feel that the course that we find ourselves in right now, you and I, AP Research, do you feel that this, in a way, fits the professional signaling variables you were looking at? Like, does having a high schooler in their junior year or senior year carrying out research that in some cases is like what they would be doing at an undergrad, possibly graduate level, depending on how ambitious that student's being, like, does that fit within your study? Like, we're going to get meta about this class, but does that kind of fit?
Yeah, I totally think so. More so because of the implications behind what AP Research is, as in we've started to associate research with some kind of accelerated learning, when in principle this class is, I think, very adaptable to juniors in high school, because we're carrying out smaller scale individual studies. This is a year long, so it's a great way to find out how you can manage these long-term projects, something that I didn't know how to do before I did this class. But it's really behind the psychology of why people are choosing to take this class. Not really what we're actually learning. A lot of people associate with this class showing colleges that I can do research.
That's right where my head was going.
Yeah. So in that case, that would be majority illusion. We are in an actual study site.
Yeah, and it's the idea that I'm doing this work to get into college. Actually, I shouldn't even say that. I'm doing this work to distinguish myself in my college application process. And even the way that it's portrayed on the College Board's website, it's like, okay, well, these are the schools that endorse it. I'm frequently getting questions like, does this even transfer to credits? And my canned response is typically, you may not get credits for it. It is a demonstration that you know how to do something that other high school students have never done before. And I guess when Kevin Cho was visiting, when we had him on, he was kind of saying the same thing. It's like, you're doing something that most high school students don't do. So when you get into college, you're prepped. So this is where I'm a little bit torn with it. If a student is doing it intrinsically, like they really just like, not to get like, to drop the titular line of the podcast, but if they're doing an intrinsic investigation, they're trying to figure out, like in your case, like you're into psychology, this class is the only class that really is going to give you the platform to do what you did this year, versus someone who is doing it because they're just like, I just got to get this done. I got to get it on my transcript and make it happen. It's like, does it not matter in the context of your work? Because either way, the person on the outside of it is going to see it as professional signaling, and they're going to feel that majority illusion pressure.
That's actually a really interesting take.
Boom, got it. Yeah.
I think a lot of people, like everybody struggles with the conflict between intrinsic motivations behind doing certain things and extrinsic. In the context of majority illusion, we really just look at how much was this influenced by other people or by some kind of external perception. Mm-hmm. So it really doesn't factor in the intrinsic aspect of, are these kids doing it for their own means? But data-wise, these kids would have reported on my survey that they don't feel very pressured to do something because other kids are doing it, which also probably factored into the fact that I didn't get a positive or a positive return of the majority illusion index, but those were separated by the pressure scores.
Right.
And I think that it'd be really good for future studies to implement this pressure score into the majority illusion. This didn't exist on the actual framework that my initial literature review looked at. And I think I wanted to look at the pressure scores because majority illusion, it really extends beyond just statistics of how inflated kids are seeing behaviors and more of how that's psychologically impacting them or engendering actual behavior in a population. So to go back to the whole aspect of intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, I think that everybody struggles with this because I've seen this in my literature review. Teens are the most salient to feeling peer pressured. Mm-hmm. Or even culturally pressured to do things that colleges would like to see on their application. And I honestly thought a bit about this. Did I take this class for a completely intrinsic means or because I felt like this would look good on my college application? And I honestly can't exclude the second factor. I think a lot of the people in this class feel compelled to show that I've differentiated myself from the general population of students at my school by doing this academically challenging course. But I think the most important thing is to not have that as your main motivator. I think that as long as your main motivator lies in intrinsic grounds, mm-hmm. that's really what matters, because the whole concept of majority illusion is that students can't pick whether they have majority illusion or not. Social pressure is something that just happens naturally, especially for adolescents, but for everybody, even for adults, even for children. And I think that as long as you don't fully give yourself up to these majority illusions or social biases and whatnot, that's really all that matters. You can't completely eject it, but...
Yeah, we're too deep in it for it not to have an influence on us on some level. And it speaks to that the extrinsic incentive bias, like the idea that, someone from the outside, like they see you taking this course and they're just like, oh, Liz is just doing that because she wants to look good on her college applications. Whereas you would be like, no, like I enjoy psychology. Like I'm trying to like investigate something that I wouldn't have the opportunity to do. I'm curious about it. You had a great line earlier in the year, like it was about, I forget the exact wording, but it was like, are you open enough to notice something and are you curious enough to investigate it, which mm-hmm. is kind of like what I would hope for the class. But at the same time, we can't dismiss what you just described, which is there's lateral pressure that's happening with teens in their own age group. But then there's an enormous amount of pressure coming from the top down from the adults in the room, for lack of a better term, where they're like, oh, you got to get into the school. You got to. So it's hard to parse out at an individual level how much of that motivation is extrinsic and intrinsic. And I think it's worth critically asking. I mean, even adults need to ask themselves those questions, like why are they doing what they're doing?
Yeah, I agree.
Do you have any closing words for the season to anyone who is considering taking this course or doing independent research at the high school level?
I think that it's really important to consider what you like to do. And because, well, in my case, I have ADHD. And ADHD, what it is, it's really all about attention and motivation. So if I want to do something, I'll really get into it and come up with a great product. If I don't feel interested in something, my attention dies out. That's basically what that is. So I'm kind of naturally geared to only put myself into things that I feel intrinsically motivated by, because extrinsic motivators don't really work as well on like a brain like mine. Mm-hmm. But I think for other people, it's really important to look at whether the things that you're putting yourself into are going to add to who you see yourself as, rather than what other people are expecting of you, what colleges are expecting of you, or what your parents are expecting of you. And I think that in taking research, there are so many good things you can take away from this class that go beyond extrinsic motivators, which is why I think even people that started this class based off of an extrinsic motivator somehow turned it into an intrinsic thing, because you can only keep going when there's some kind of real value being put into the work that you want to produce in this class. And yeah, so I think if you're trying to do AP research, IRB work, or any study, whatever it is, just do it, because it's really going to help.
Thank you so much, Liz, for your time. And that's the end of season 3. Woo!
Woo!